Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here sharing my experience with you. As you were told, I traveled a long way. Outriders made the effort to bring me here. So I'm very honored and privileged to share this transnational intercontinental adventure of Mutante. Okay, so uh, in December 2016, Colombia woke up to a terrible news. Juliana Samboni, an indigent girl, 7-year-old, was kidnapped from her home, raped and killed by a rich white man called Rafael Uribe Noguera. What followed was total mediatic hysteria. Basically, everybody shouting, kill him, hang him. And the whole narrative was very tabloid style, very, very gruesome. Was the discussion, there wasn't any discussion, but basically the public agenda was around the subject of populist punitivism. So yeah, like hang him, basically. There was no discussion of the depth of the problem or the reasons why this was happening or etc. And the curious thing was that 2 weeks earlier, El Tiempo, which is Colombia's biggest newspaper, published this news in some of the last pages without a call on the cover. And the news basically said, in Colombia, 21 girls, that's a whole classroom, are raped daily, and that according to a UN report. The study also said that 18 girls between 10 and 14 become mothers each day. So that raised some questions about what's the criteria contemporary media is using right now to cover stories, what to publish, what to talk about, what not to talk about, what is a cover story, what is not a cover story, and like the treatment they're giving the news. It's all about scandal, it's all about clickbait, it's all about commercial interest. And that obviously raised some questions. As a journalist and as an editor, sharing like this experience with a longtime friend and partner, Juan Camilo Maldonado, which is my associate in this adventure, we raised like some questions around what's happening with journalism. For example, how to activate effective discussions around unrepresented problems that have become landscape. How to evolve from a journalism that discloses problems to one that discusses solutions. How to engage new generation, disengaged, apathetic audiences. How to generate the editorial conditions to achieve the understanding of complexity. How to practice a journalism that recognizes inequality, including gender inequality. How to explore emotions different from fear, indignation, and despair. This is the kind of world that current mainstream or many media gives us. You know, it's a catastrophic world. Everything is falling apart. Apocalyptic. It gives them clicks. It works commercially, but it left us and is leaving us and viewers and readers and audiences all around with this feeling of fear and of a world that's ending. So a question I raised was, how do we as editors, journalism, and media can explore other feelings? For example, hope. How can we start tackling another spectrum of feeling and emotion that can bring us together around what to do around our problems, and not only watch as this big bomb blows. Around that time, we were working in a big media international conglomerate that many of you know, millennial-focused, very cool, big media. And we were having important discussions within around liberty of press and the commercial side of media. And those discussions led us, me and my friend and partner, Juan Camilo, to quit our jobs as editors of that media conglomerate channel in Colombia. So we were left unemployed. We didn't have a job. And we basically dedicated ourselves to going to the psychologist, to therapy, to try to understand what was going on around the world and what we needed to do and what needed to be done. You know, basically issues around integrity and what are we going to do with our lives if we're going to follow this path of journalism, but it's taking us to a place in which we have to basically lie to sell more beer or to sell more sugar drinks instead of, well, telling the things as they are. So, amongst other troubles and problems we were dealing with in the psychologist's chair, and there we had like this infatuation, because there in the psychology room in therapy, where you're dealing with problems, with deep-rooted problems, like you sort of understand like how to solve them. So from therapy, we got inspired in, okay, you go to the therapist and you start to talk about your problems, you know, and the exercise of talking about your problems then leads you to a phase of understanding your problems and to know what to do about them, to solve the problems. So we sort of translated this really like simple like methodology from like therapy to the editorial world, because finally we're dealing with deep social problems that matter to most of us, in which we all have a say. So we need to talk about issues that maybe are left unsaid because they're not being prioritized, they're underrepresented. We need to understand them better. So we need to promote like the proper conditions for us to understand our problems better, and we need to know what we can do about it. Even if it's little daily actions, we need to figure out ways to tackle, as citizens, these problems. So we said, okay, we have an editorial methodology which we can bring to the journalism world. And we also have this new technology in which all of you, like many of you right now, are using to talk to one another, to communicate. New technology we can use to promote this exercise of, okay, let's try to talk about our issues, let's try to understand them better, let's try to solve them. So out of that, Mutante, which translates mutant, was born. And mutant because basically we are all mutants because we thrive to survive. And in the spirit of this conference, we strive to survive, not by the classical, like Darwinistic slogan, which says that it's the survival of the fittest. That's been reevaluated, and it's more about we survive thanks to an extensive chain of collaboration as living mutants. So it's a homage to our evolution. And we understand ourselves not as like a media, traditional media outlet, but more as a digital movement of citizen conversation. So how does it work? We have a problem, for example, sexual violence against girls, an unrepresented problem. a problem that's not been talked about in the media, but it's happening all over, an epidemic. Around that problem, we design a cycle, because our idea is to push agendas like bottom up and to be really, really like intense in the talking about these subjects through a period of time, independent from like the news, typical, that depends on what's happening in the moment or the scandal of the moment or whatever. No, we need to talk about subjects that, and we need them to be independent of those things that make them be suddenly part of the landscape. So we designed a cycle, a time cycle around those problems. And around that, we designed what we call an exercise that we call the social conversation, which is we push and invite audiences to join us in an exercise of talking, understanding, and acting about around these problems that interest us using social media. We have designed this a strategic map that's called the map of incidents, because finally we want to have incidents in society. So behind each conversation, we design a community which is an active like audience community, which is composed in the center of like Mutante, like our team, journalists, designers, photographers, social media managers, etc., editors. Around that and around these issues, we invite, for example, academics, investigators, activists, people that are generating and studying the problems like deeply, and we involve them in an exercise of generating knowledge and information around these issues. We also invite thematic influencers to join, like people that are big on social media and are interested on the subjects to join our communities. We also invite over allied media, for example, big media, because we understand ourselves like not in an ecosystem of competition against other media, because the objective is not to be like a big brand on my own. The objective is to let the message go through, to let the content circulate, to reach to a wider and broader audiences. So our content is free of rights, and we publish it through big allied media, small specialized media, and it's all about the content. We also have actors, what we call actors of incidents, people that are working, for example, in legislation around those subjects, and we also involve them in our communities. And active audiences, people that are interested. So all these people, we design closed communities and around the subjects, and are constantly generating like information, understanding, rigorous data and evidence around the subject, and also they're helping us to expand and irradiate our message. We don't even have for example, a proper like website and stuff, because again, it's not about people coming to me, it's about like the message reaching them where they are through an extensive chain of collaborative efforts. So on October, we launched our conversation, which is called Let's Talk About the Girls. Our first conversation dedicated to sexual violence against underage women in Colombia, which is an epidemic. And this was our starting piece, like that was the day Mutante was born, so we were born the same day with this conversation, which is a really difficult conversation. So we had a challenge, so okay, how are we gonna talk about like sexual violence against girls? It was difficult, but we managed to understand and to reach to a point in which, thanks to the efforts we did collectively, in which the message could go through hand in hand with the people and the audience. And so here's how it works. Remember talk, understand, and act. So in our methodology, Mondays and Tuesdays are to talk. So basically, during those 2 days, we do a lot of testimonial formats, open questions. We used a lot of native formats, that, like the ones that Instagram or Facebook gives us questions and stuff, to crowdsource questions with the audience. And for example, we did this open call to look for victims of women who were victims of sexual assault when they were underage, to come to us and tell us their story. And there was a lot of cases. We also published long-form pieces. This activity lasted for a month. Each week, we studied a dimension of the problem. And for example, the first week, we studied the problem of this thing was happening in their homes to the girls, mostly like parents or uncles. Second week was girls weren't getting the proper sexual and reproductive rights, because they have the right to opt for abortion when they are raped and pregnant, but girls weren't given that right. So we investigated, and the next third and fourth week we investigated another dimensions of the problem. But just like to explain, we also publish on Mondays and Tuesdays testimonial audios. Wednesdays and Thursdays are to understand, and through this work with the active audience, victims telling us their stories, we could understand like what is happening, what are the issues, it's happening at home, okay? What happens when you go to the justice system? So we could understand that there's a lot of re-victimization going on in the justice system because of the macho culture. So for example, there's persons from we did many like live streams, infographics, and tweet debates to understand some of these problematic dimensions on Wednesdays and Tuesdays, which are like 2 days we dedicate to understand. And on Fridays, we act. So we publish a lot of manuals, how-tos, protocols, guides, in which, for example, this one it's called Before Putting a Lawsuit, Be Prepared. So we give tips, and all of this is done in alliance with organizations of experts, activists that have worked around this specific subjects, for example, legal assistance in this type of cases, this organization. This one is a directory of what to do if someone near you is facing that problem and is pregnant. So which organizations can you reach, etc. in a lot of like very portable formats that people could transmit through WhatsApp, and again, free of rights, so anybody can use them. Educational games, for example, we discovered that whenever a girl went to justice, the guys at the Justice Department basically asked her, okay, so how were you dressed that day? Were you, oh yeah, you were provoking. So it was, we discovered that a lot of this had to do both the abuses and the re-victimizations had to do obviously with this overwhelming like macho culture, which is all over the place. So that was a problem we understood needed to be tackled. So, okay, we did videos, we did a workshop with victims in which we like helped them tell the story through artistic practices and stuff. And this led us to our second conversation. Our first conversation, let's talk about the girls. We also did a crowdfunding, which we gained some money to do the second conversation, which is let's talk about sexual education. In Colombia, as in many countries, I assume like this one, sexual education, it's all about the genitalization of the issue, and I have a penis and this works like this and it's like that, but there's no education around genders or roles and everything that needs to be talked about for us to have a more healthier relationship. So during this conversation, we did this challenge in Twitter, which was absolutely viral, in which we challenged people to talk about anecdotes of their sexual education. So everybody like shared, I had this teacher that said that whatever, and all the like cultural prejudices. So this exercise helps us to get a better insight of what's going on anatomically in society, so we can fill those informational necessities and voids with editorial in content and formats that people are consuming, because we're all about being where people are. We're not about like, okay, so we want people to read the 80,000 reportage that people aren't reading. So we recognize there's new audiences, new readerships, new formats. We celebrate that, and we are going where you are to give you the narratives as you are used to consuming them, and to participate with us in the exercise of constructing a more healthy informational ecosystem and agenda around the problems. This led us to our third conversation, which is called Niñas No Madres. It was a regional conversation, 5 countries, Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Guatemala, etc., around the subjects of infancy, motherhood. Many women are having babies from a very young age. We feel that's a forced motherhood because the states aren't giving the girls the right to abort in cases in which obviously they're being raped. So what we learned, the publication of our investigations is only a point of departure. For many newsrooms, they publish their investigations and that's it. For us, we publish our investigations and that's just the start point for the conversation, an exercise in which we gain a lot more of information and insights for what needs to be done. Asking and listening is powerful. Social conversation works to install bottom-up agendas and to detect and solve information voids. We're journalists, but also moderators, audience editors, and community managers. And tackling unrepresented agendas serves to nestle lasting communities. We build these communities around these subjects, and these communities keep on flowing, keep on exchanging information. After that, we've done a bunch of conversations around marijuana users and their rights, homicides in Medellin, which are on the rise, police brutality, and many other subjects. Next year, we're going to launch our membership program and 30 conversations. So, thank you. This was me, Mutante from Colombia. Follow us, and I love you.